Good morning, everybody. This is the Gender Justice Everywhere seminar. We're just waiting for participants to join. I'll give that another minute. So I think I'm going, good morning, everybody. My name's Katie Thompson. I'm head of the Rule of Law, Security and Human Rights team of UNDP based in New York. I'm very happy to welcome you all to the webinar, Gender Justice Everywhere, Women's Empowerment Through Justice Initiatives. I first want to welcome Simona Ellis Oluoch-Olunya, the Regional Policy Advisor from UN Women Arab States Regional Office, and she's joining me in co-moderating this event, which is really great. And we have three great panelists who are here to celebrate this day with us and to talk about positive things we can do to support gender equality, women's empowerment around the world. As UNDP, we're working in a very committed way on women's access to justice and support to the rule of law, as well as addressing discrimination all over the world. It's really a fundamental part for us of what we're doing in contribution to the Agenda 2030 and to the SDGs. And I think whilst we say that we are humbly committed to doing this work, what we know is there's still many miles to go before 2030 and many, many miles to go in order to achieve gender equality. So we're really looking forward to hearing from everybody today to get inspiration, to get ideas for action, and ideas for how we can improve what we're doing. And we look forward to a really lively exchange. We're going to have a set of videos, a set of presentations, and a short Q&A. Please post your questions in the Zoom box. And I will pass over now to Simona to start the proceedings more substantively. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Katie. And as Katie said, it's an absolute delight to join everyone online today for International Women's Day under the theme of women's leadership, achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 world. And indeed, the world in which we see today is unexpected and unique. We have up to 70,000 women who are at the front of the COVID pandemic response and recovery, who provide health and social care to our elderly, infirm, and our children. We also have women leaders who exemplify a unique expression of leadership across the globe, which combines, among other things, compassion with decisive action. It is fully inclusive and leaves no one behind, and it is responsive and visionary. So where women lead, whether at a national level, community, or household, results are evident. I would like to share also a couple of words about UN Women. It is the United Nations entity that's dedicated to gender equality and to women's empowerment. And it's a global champion for women and girls that was established in order to accelerate progress on meeting their needs across the world, working in partnership with our UN sisters, such as UNDP, member states, civil society, and many other key and important actors. So I have the delight and the honor to introduce our panel. I'm just going to give you a few words about each panelist, and of course we will learn more about them as they present their session. I'd first like to introduce Madame Fatou Baldin. She is an active advocate against sexual and gender-based violence with a particular focus on female genital mutilation, and she works in the Gambia. Last year, she won, or she was awarded, as a member of the Order of the British Empire for outstanding services to the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. To follow Fatou, I then will introduce my dear friend, Hanan Kamar, who works for UN Women in the country office in the state of Palestine. Hanan is a gender justice expert who has worked with the UN organizations for over 14 years, as well as civil society, specifically on rule of law, access to justice and violence against women. And my third panelist is Aisha Mughal. Aisha is a transgender woman activist who has served as a UN expert consultant to the Ministry of Human Rights in the government of Pakistan. Aisha is a distinguished woman of firsts. Aisha became the world's first transgender woman to represent the government as part of the official state of delegations at the UN CEDAW committee. She also has the honor of becoming Pakistan's first transgender lecturer and first transgender person to serve as a consultant in the Federal Ministry of Pakistan. So we are excited to introduce our panel to you now, and I now hand over to Katie.
Thanks, Simone. So may I join you in welcoming all those panelists. It's just so great to have such an amazing panel here. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over so that we can see the video about Fatu's work in the Gambia, UNDP's work in the Gambia on transitional justice, and for us to hear more from Fatu about the process in which she's been engaged. We're really looking forward to this. We're going to be, the videos we see are going to be around 1 minute long and then about 10 minutes for our speakers. We're going to go directly from the video to the speakers. We hope it's all going to go well technologically. Thanks very much. If you could launch the video, colleagues.
My name is Musa Bakatosao, and I'm the former Deputy Executive Secretary of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission of the Gambia. UNDP's contribution towards my professional development extended toward gender training. It allowed me to use a gender lens in all the decisions I made at the TRRC. UNDP was also very relevant when it comes to partnership building with members of civil society organizations. One of my proudest moments working with UNDP was the opportunity to jointly mobilize resources, which were used for purposes of supporting victims and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. This would not have been possible without the support of the UNDP. Quite a number of people were surprised when I was appointed, mainly because I was only 28 years old, so I was a young woman. The former Minister of Justice, Abubakar Tambedo, had a vision for the transitional justice process. Part of his vision was the inclusion of women and young people in the decision-making process.
My name is Fatu Balde, MBE. I am the founder of Women in Liberation and Leadership, WIL, and I am also the program manager for the gender justice program that we run. WIL was established to support women and vulnerable groups, particularly those who have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. UNDP has been very supportive to our organization, WIL, but also to myself as an individual, as a founder of the organization. Transitional justice was something new in the Gambia. So when the process started, one of the first things that we received was the training. Our capacity was really built through the UN system, especially UNDP. We were also fortunate to be one of the partners of UNDP. We received funding that was one of the first funds that we were awarded. Having that support really did give donors confidence to support us, which I believe really empowered us as an organization. The UNDP is also very open to civil society, that we feel so comfortable we can come up with a concept with ideas that we would share with the team. For instance, recently we realized that the voices of LGBTI community and commercial sex workers were not included in the TRRC process, even though they are known victims from these groups. We approached the UNDP with a concept to support these groups, and this is now leading to a nationwide consultation that will provide these vulnerable groups with safe spaces where they will feel comfortable enough to share their stories, so that their experience is also recorded in the Truth Commission.
Thank you so much for that. Fatou, would you now like to just speak briefly to the video?
Yes, thank you. Thank you again for inviting me, and thank you to everyone that is joining us today. I guess I've already introduced myself in the video. My name is Fatou Balde, MBE, and I am the founder of Women in Liberation and Leadership WIL. We are an organization based in the Gambia that work and support women empowerment and address sexual and gender-based violence. So, as I indicated in this short video that you were watching, our work has been supported by UNDP over the past 2 years. We have come up with approaches and initiatives that allows women and girls to participate in the TRRC, that is the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission in the Gambia, to ensure that their voices and their experiences are not left behind. We all know that TJ aims to address issues arising from violence. In our context, the Gambia, this violence arises from the dictatorship, 22 years dictatorship of former President Yahya Jammeh. However, in the Gambia, the tendencies for issues that affect women, particular sexual and gender-based violence, for these issues not to be addressed has been existing before Jammeh took over, during Jammeh's era and post-Jammeh's era. So when the TRRC started and the transitional justice process in general, we wanted to ensure that women were meaningfully represented. And when we say meaningfully represented, we were not talking about women being appointed as deputies in institutions, which is very common in the Gambia. So in all our different mechanisms, transitional justice mechanisms, we had women appointed as deputies where the heads were the leaders. Also, when we talked about meaningful representation, consultation was done with victim organizations. In most of the times, victims themselves were excluded. In instances where victims were included, women were mainly left out. So through UNDP, we as a civil society organization, and we received support to build our capacity to support us so that as a civil society, we can challenge issues that we felt that the TRRC, for instance, wasn't addressing in the aspect of gender. So through that support, we encourage the TRRC to open a gender unit, but also not just opening the gender unit, to ensure that this gender unit was meaningfully doing its work, not just ticking boxes that we have a gender unit, then that the issues around women has been addressed. So our capacity was really developed. We received support to attend trainings where the UNDP would bring in experts from international organizations who have worked in TJ and gender justice to train us around those issues, and also to empower our staff on how to challenge these issues as well. Through these trainings, we developed spatial skills on how to engage communities. We used our already existing contacts at community level. We organized, for instance, radio programs which were funded by UNDP. During these radio programs, we would bring in guest speakers. We would also explain the different forms of violations, because one thing that we realized at community level was that when we talk about human rights violations, even though some women experience human rights violations, they were not aware that these were violations against them. So we found ways to extend that narrative at the community level. We held radio programs in local languages to explain what human rights violation meant, what sexual violence meant to Gambian women. We provided spaces where Gambian women also call and tell us how they felt and how they wanted to be involved in the TRRC process. That was possible because of the support that we received from the UNDP in the Gambia. I will just stop for now in case you have any questions you want to ask me.
Fatou, thank you so much for that. We'll take questions after we've gone through the 3 videos and the 3 presentations. So what I would like to do now is to invite everybody to watch the 2nd video. And the 2nd video is from Palestine. And following that video, Hanan Kamar will speak to it directly afterwards.
Thank you.
أنا نعمة، عندي 4 أطفال، حالياً بشتغلش. أنا أصلاً يعني كوافيرة. فتحت صالون تقريباً 6 شهور هيك. أنا نعمة، عندي 4 أطفال، حالياً بشتغلش. أنا أصلاً يعني كوافيرة. فتحت صالون تقريباً 6 شهور هيك، وسكرت طبعاً بسبب كورونا. وطبعاً بعد زواج استمر 10 سنين ومشاكل بشكل يومي. يعني كل إنسان وله طاقته يعني، وأنا طاقتي وصلت لعند استنفذت تماماً. طبعاً رحت على عيادة الوكالة، كان في أخصائي نفسية هناك ومحامي. كنت بدي إياهم يساعدوني بقضية نفقة، وحكوا لي روح على جمعية عائشة، واتصل هو على محامية مسكت يعني ملفي. كانت الشكوى الأساسية للسيدة أنها كانت تعاني من عنف منزلي من قبل زوجها، وأيضاً بالإضافة إلى عنف نفسي. جميع هذه المعايير إن هي سيدة غير عاملة، بالإضافة إنها سيدة معنفة، بالتالي كانت تنطبق عليها معايير الهشاشة من أجل الحصول على مساعدة قانونية من ضمن المشروع. طبعاً ساعدوني لأنه مجاني، كمان أنا بديش أوكل محامي بفلوس، وهذا دعم كبير طبعاً بالنسبة لحد في ظروفي. تم تقديم خدمة الدعم النفسي الفردي للسيدة، بحيث استفادت من 5 جلسات فردية من قبل إحدى الأخصائيات المتابعة لحالتها. تم رفع قضية نفقة زوجة ونفقة أولاد. طبعاً الكل كان رافض إني أرفع دعوة، يعني مفكرين يعني زي كل مرة بحرق وأرجع، وكان كل الدنيا طبعاً ضدي، يعني مش كنت لحالي واقفة. بعد ذلك حصلنا على أحكام تم تنفيذها، حكم يعني القاضي إلي وللولد الصغير، وحالياً باخذ نفقة. من خلالها صارت قادرة أنها هي تلبي متطلبات الحياة واحتياجاتها الأساسية وهي موجودة عند أهلها. بنعرف في ظل ارتفاع الحياة المعيشية وفي ظل الظروف الصعبة اللي إحنا بنمر فيها قد تكون هذه المبالغ أو لا تكون هذه المبالغ أكيد إنها غير كافية لسيدة. يعني يمكن ما كانش إلي تقريبا سند، وبصراحة الوحيد هي جمعية عايشة. لولا العيادة القانونية يعني ساعدتني في موضوع النفقة كان ممكن أيامها انجبرت أرجع وعايشة نفس حياتي السابقة.
لهيك بنطالب إنه ربط التمكين القانوني للنساء بالتمكين الاقتصادي، بحيث تكون السيدة قادرة على إنها لا سمح الله إذا وصلت لمرحلة تنفصل فيها عن زوجها أو انتهت الحياة الزوجية ما بينها وكانوا الأطفال في حماية في حضانتها، أن تكون قادرة على حضانة هؤلاء الأطفال.
Hanan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's actually an honor for me to participate in this important event. Actually, the video which we have just seen represents the real lives of thousands of Palestinian women, victims and survivors of violence who are in dire need for support. Before I present on the program and how it supports women's access to justice and empowerment of women, allow me to highlight key issues as pertaining to the socio-political context in Palestine. While there are a number of key external and internal factors that affect sustainable development in the rule of law and the realization of human rights in Palestine, the most significant external factor is the ongoing occupation by Israel. As for the internal factors, they include the deep national division between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank authorities since 2006, the dysfunctional legislative environment, the fractured legal jurisdiction, the discriminatory social norms, and others. As a conflict-affected population, women and children experience multi-layers of insecurity and discrimination due to the ongoing Israeli occupation and the entrenched patriarchal norms and practices within the Palestinian society, which put them at higher risks of violence in the public and private spheres. So with this in mind, and due to the predominant cultural norms, women are often stigmatized when reporting gender-based violence to the authorities, particularly sexual assault crimes. Violence against women in Palestine actually is still an area of concern. As per the latest violence survey that was conducted by the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics in 2019, 29% of the currently married women or ever married women experienced at least one form of violence by their husbands in Palestine. This situation has been further exacerbated in 2020 by the impact of the global coronavirus pandemic, which has brought the economy to a halt and increased rates of gender-based violence. So against this, you can imagine the complexity surrounding women's access to justice. So it's also very important at the same time to remember that Palestinian women, as women in other countries, do not form a homogeneous group, as some of them at higher level of vulnerability and risks. This includes women, survivors of violence, women in conflict with the law, women with disabilities, and others. So the Rule of Law program, SAWASIA, which represents the primary programmatic vehicle of the United Nations for advancing the rule of law and gender justice and human rights, brings together the main UN entities, including UNDP, UN Women, and UNICEF, mandated and invested in these areas in an integrated program framework with focus on SDGs 16 and 5. SAWASIA 2 addresses gender justice gaps and discrimination against women, which are deeply entrenched in the justice and security systems in Palestine. It has dedicated key focus to issues related to enhancing women's access to justice and empowerment of women beneficiaries of services. Towards that end, the program invested in professional partnership with the justice and security sectors institutions and with civil society organizations, It has, together with its partners, identified key areas of concern and focus that should be addressed to enhance women's access to justice, including the discriminatory social norms among service providers, decision makers, and the community at large, at the level of discriminatory legal and policy framework, at the level of lack of adequate capacities, and other challenges. So in line with this, the development and the advocacy to endorse a responsive family protection bill as a key priority to enhance women's access to justice in Palestine, which focuses on preventing violence and ensuring protection for women survivors of violence, has received momentum through the advocacy led by the program and its partners and the technical expertise provided by the program to national and international partners. Moreover, at the level of the delivery of responsive services, we noticed that the delivery of the services has been strengthened and women's access to justice has been enhanced by the program support. Actually, the program has invested in improving the capacity and the responsiveness of the services across the justice and the security chain in line with international and gender justice standards. This has resulted in increase in the rate of reporting of violence against women cases, increase in the number of cases that were transferred by the prosecution to the court, and increase in the number of cases that have received conviction. For example, in 2019 and 2020, the family and juvenile protection units, which are run by the Palestinian Civil Police, have received a total of 4,323 family cases. At the same time, the number of cases that were transferred by the specialized prosecutors to the courts in the same years reached to 6,015 cases, and the number of VAW cases that have been convicted in 2019 and 2020 reached to 1,911 cases. Against these numbers, which show enhancement in the service delivery to women victims and survivors of violence compared to previous years, I would like to highlight key achievements that were made available within the justice and security sectors with the program supports, and which have enhanced women survivors of violence access to justice. The first point has to do with the establishment of violence against women specialized services all across the justice and the security chain. This included actually the assignment of specialized officers, the development of standard operating procedures, and also the capacity building interventions, which targeted a great number, I can say, of service providers. For example, a total of 6,439, of which 3,291 females and 3,148 males have been targeted with capacity building interventions through Sawasiya program only during 2019 and 2020. The second point has to do with the refurbishment and the preparation of responsive facilities, which are key to maintain survivors' privacy and confidentiality. Through the program support, one-stop centers have been established, one is completed and others are under preparation. Violence against women specialized court is under preparation. The third point has to do with coordination, which we know that it is one of the core issues that will ensure complementarity and efficiency and effectiveness of services. As a result of the support of the program, 4 coordination platforms have been established between the different stakeholders within the justice and the security sectors. Acknowledging the importance of women enrollment in the justice and security sectors as a right in itself and as a significant contributing factor, through the program support, we have noticed that women representation and enrollment in the justice and security sectors has increased in 2020 compared to 2019. For example, in the police force, in 2020, it has reached 4.9% compared to 3% in 2019. In the public prosecution, it reached 21% compared to 17% in 2019. And within the judiciary, it reached 24% compared to 19% in 2019. The emergency situation also has imposed many challenges on the work of the justice and security sectors. So the program, largely building on UN Women's wealth of expertise, led on the production of critical knowledge. This included mapping of services, of shelter services, assessments, and others. At the same time, I would like to highlight that 5 key institutions, including the police, the prosecution, the courts, the Supreme Judge Department, the Ministry of Social Development, have developed emergency plans through the program support. At the same time, 147 service providers from these sectors have received hygiene and safety kits. 11 courts have been provided with thermometers, and at the same time, 78 female inmates, including 7 children of female inmates, have received hygiene kits at the rehabilitation centers in the West Bank and Gaza. Also, the program has contributed to the milestone adoption of an emergency protocol by the Council of Ministers, which ensured victims and survivors of violence safety during the emergency situation. Actually, due to the internal and external...
Hanan, just to alert you, you have less than 1 minute left.
Okay. I would like quickly to highlight that in 2019 and 2020, a total of 29,790 women have received legal aid services in front of the Israeli and the Palestinian jurisdiction. Also, at the same time, a total of 28,457 in 2019 and 2020 have been reached with messages and awareness on women's rights and gender justice. Thank you.
Hanan, thank you so much for that robust overview. And I'm sure there will be plenty of questions coming in shortly for all of our panelists. So now we have traveled from the Gambia to Palestine, and our last destination is Pakistan. So I will hand over for the last video from Pakistan, and then Aisha will speak to that directly after the video. Thank you.
शकीला बैठी हुई है, चॉकलेट बैठी हुई है, दीदार बैठी हुई है, लवली बैठी हुई है। सब यहाँ पर मुझे ऐसे लोग नजर आ रहे हैं जो कि गुज़िश्ता एक से
They should be given the right to report any offense or any crime against them. We have to win acceptance for this community, and we need to identify laws and procedures which do not cater to this community. तो आप इतना कमा लेते कि आप अच्छी अपना
एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेंगे। कल को हमारी तो शादियां हो जाएंगी, मर्द और औरतों के लिए है वो सेम
I think this training is giving opportunity to a lot of trans community members who are from different areas. So their challenges, their expectations is almost same, but their dynamics is a little bit different in every area, in every city, in every province. So I think together we will be more focused on our challenges, on the protection of rights, and definitely what is the legislation which is coming for 2030.
That will basically help trans community to come out in a very visible way, in a very respectful way, in which they can claim that their rights are human rights.
Behaviors of the family change.
Ministry of Human Rights have drafted rules for the Transgender Act, have drafted guidelines for police and law enforcement agencies, so that every institution and every government department can be sensitive towards gender identity and transgender rights. We want transgender people to become part of every organization, to work in every possible capacity, and that is how we will break the negative stereotypes regarding transgender community. I think UNDP and Ministry of Human Rights are playing a very important role in uplifting the status of transgender community.
Aisha, over to you, please.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and a very happy International Women's Day. So I think, as I also mentioned in the video, that Ministry of Human Rights and UNDP is playing an important role in the implementation of transgender law in Pakistan. So I will like to talk about the drafting process of the law. I mean, back in 2017, when the lawmaking process started, the drafting of the bill was a very important step, and UNDP Pakistan played a very important role in it. We conducted nationwide consultations, and the best thing was that it was an inclusive approach. Transgender community and community leaders and transgender organizations, civil society were made part of every step during the drafting process, during lobbying, and during advocacy. So with all those, consultations and feedback from the community, we used to have detailed discussion with the government stakeholders, with the Senate committees, and finally, after I think almost within a 2 years time, in May 2018, the transgender law was passed by the government of Pakistan. And since then, UNDP has assisted the government, the federal and provincial governments, to develop policies for the effective implementation of the act. In 2019, I was appointed by UNDP as consultant to the Ministry of Human Rights. And so my basic task was to ensure the effective implementation of the said act. Because, we do have laws in our country, but the important question is of its implementation. So I'm really glad that UNDP not only assisted the government in drafting the law, but it also assisted the government of Pakistan in its effective implementation. Until date, we are, working towards this goal. So I will just, quickly walk you through the initiatives that the UNDP has taken with the support of the Ministry of Human Rights for the protection and promotion of transgender community in Pakistan. Lawmaking was a very important thing, which I have also explained right now. Nationwide consultations, and after the law was passed, there was nationwide training on the law on human rights were conducted. I, as part of UNDP consultant to the Ministry of Human Rights, assisted the ministry in developing several guidelines for the law enforcement agencies, guidelines for healthcare providers. I also assisted the Ministry of Human Rights in drafting the rules of the act. And now in 2020, the rules were also got approved by the Parliament of Pakistan. So rules basically, explain the act. They highlight the relevant government stakeholders, which are important to implement every section of the law. And then UNDP also played a very important role in COVID. There was a rapid need assessment done by UNDP Pakistan to understand the needs of the grassroots level transgender community during the COVID pandemic. and UNDP provided ration and food and food support to the to the grassroots level trans community in Islamabad as well as in other provinces of the country. So I think we are going. We are on moving towards the right direction. I hope that this continues because we need to have continuous follow-ups with all with all the initiatives and endeavors that UNDP is taking, because it takes time to change social it takes time to have a social change. We need time to change the mindset of people, because even today in Pakistan, transgender community have many challenges. The biggest challenge is the family acceptance and the social acceptance. Um, although Pakistan has become one of the progressive countries in terms of law, and we are having inclusive approaches while developing policies, but I think even today, the biggest challenge is the implementation of the law, as well as the biggest challenge is to increase the social acceptance. And for that, we need to work to have to create more economic opportunities for the transgender community, because until and unless we do not empower the transgender community economically and financially, we won't be able to change the negative mindset. We won't be able to change the negative stereotyping, the stigma that is attached with being a transgender person to being a Fadisara Hijra in Pakistan. Um, since the inception of the country, for many decades, the transgender community were marginalized. There were no resources available. Um, Most of the trans community, unlike the developed part of the world in Pakistan, most of the community members are uneducated. They do not have access to education. They do not have access to economic opportunities. So I think now what I look as a way forward is that UNDP continues working with the government of Pakistan and create more economic opportunities, more jobs, more grants for the grassroots level trans community, so that they can become part of the mainstream professions, mainstream organizations. And I think we are taking small steps, but at least we are moving in the right direction. I would also like to highlight that recently the Ministry of Human Rights has approved the budget from the Parliament, and the PC1, which is the government project for Transgender Protection Center, has been approved. And soon the Ministry of Human Rights would launch the first government Transgender Protection Center in Pakistan, and UNDP played a very important role in assisting the Ministry of Human Rights in establishing this protection center. So I think with these initiatives, I see that in coming years, there'll be more concrete steps to empower the transgender community, and UNDP would continue working with government to protect human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha. It's been fabulous to hear all of these contributions, really inspiring. And what we would like to do now is to hear a little bit more from all of the panelists, because what we've been listening to is how this focus on gender justice and the focus on rights is a combination of efforts from individuals, activists, institutions, international organizations, and the impact of that is not only on legal rights. The justice dimension goes way beyond the legal sphere, and it's really about human lives, it's about dignity, it's about opportunity. So the idea of justice is not only about the law, but also about how we're going to live our lives in general. And I think this inspiration is really important for us to take home with us today. What I'd like to do is to ask the panelists if they could perhaps reflect a little bit more on what were the specific things that is making their work successful. Like, what were the ingredients that are making your work move over time, enabling you to have a transformative impact? Are there some things you would like to highlight and share with the audience? So Fatou, I'll turn to you first. Are there some specific champions or specific impacts from your work in the Gambia? I know that you're very involved in documenting your work, and I know you're using media a lot, and I'm really interested to hear about that. But please, over to you.
Thank you again. I think as the theme of this year's International Women's Day, myself and the organization I work with, every day in our work, we choose to challenge. We choose to challenge gender stereotypes. We choose to challenge the representation, the lack of representation, inadequate representation of women in decision-making positions in the Gambia, which ultimately has a big impact for women and girls. It trickles down to the community level. We choose to challenge discriminatory laws that results in women's rights being violated. I think one of the things that we take pride in at WIL is that we use existing mechanisms like community-led strategies that we know that the communities will take ownership of. Because what we want to do, we want to sustain our work at community level. What we want to do is that when we implement a program and we want the community to take ownership and continue this work. So this is why a lot of our work is very much community led. We have activities called listening circles. These are activities that we organize. Our listening circles are for women only. When we look at victims in the transitional justice process, we don't just look at direct victims of Jammeh's era, because we believe that in one way or another, every Gambian woman is a victim of one form or another of gender-based violence. So when we provide these safe spaces, we share with women, but also we listen to women. When we talk about justice at international level, what does justice mean to a Gambian woman who lives in the rural area? Who, for instance, when we talk about the Truth Commission, if the findings comes out and recommendations come out to prosecute Yaya Jammeh, is that justice for a Gambian woman who lives at the rural area, who has no access to water, whose children have no access to schools or proper health care, maternal care? What does justice mean to these women? So when we provide these spaces, these are the conversations that we have with women. We also challenge the attitude of men towards sexual and gender-based violence. Through one of our programs called the Attire Chats, we engage young men in conversations to challenge the frequent occurrence of gender-based violence. We also engage women traditional communicators who we know are very influential at community level, who other women listen to. We send our messages to these women who then go out in their community to share with their communities. We also provide psychosocial support. In the Gambia, one of the issues we have, access to mental health is very limited if it's available. And we have a very strong culture of silence around mental health and access. So through our safe spaces, we provide this as well. But most importantly, one of the things that the transitional justice and gender justice has provided for Gambian women is breaking the silence on sexual and gender-based violence. For as long as I know, women were not given the spaces, or women didn't have the courage to come out and talk about sexual and gender-based violence when they experience it or access justice, because we have cultural norms and attitude that has been embedded in our society so much that women are silenced to talk about their experiences. So as a result of the present transitional justice, the fact that we are talking more and more about sexual violence, women are getting more confidence to talk about the issues that are affecting them. We started a Me Too movement where young women are coming out and saying, we are not going to accept sexual and gender-based violence anymore. But having said that, we still see that the legacies of dictatorship continues in both explicit and subtle ways to try to silence women. So at the moment, even though we have a new government, we are in a transition, representation of women at cabinet, we have 19 cabinet positions, only 3 are female. At National Assembly, over 56 positions, we have less than 7 women sitting there. So when issues of women are put up at that level, because we don't have enough representation, these are things that are affecting us every day. And as an organization and an individual, we choose to challenge these norms and stereotypes. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatou. What's striking me as you speak is this combination of different factors, from the cultural, the social, the legal, and actually the economic. You didn't mention it so much then, but the economic has been mentioned also by Aisha as she was presenting, and the interchange between generations that you're mentioning. This is also critical. Women in leadership, as we've already heard in the Gambia, are actually quite young, and this is just fantastic. It's just a fantastic inspiration to change for actually also the older generations. I find that completely inspiring myself, and it's really positive to hear about the Me Too movement, which is coming from taking this entry point of transitional justice to change society in general. It's just fantastic work. I was wondering if you mentioned about having so few women in leadership positions, but do you think that this youth impact will change that within the foreseeable future in the Gambia, and how much difference would that make?
I think one thing that I have observed over the recent years is that young Gambian women are empowered. When we talk about empowerment, women empowerment, we are empowered, we are breaking barriers. But the issue that we are having, we have structural barriers, structural violence that continues to hold back women. So before, the argument was that we didn't have many Gambian women who were educated. Now that has changed. We have numerous women who are educated at university level, at degree, at PhD level, that we do not lack. But the structures that continue to hold women back are the issues that are facing us. And unless we break those barriers, it will be difficult. But we are very optimistic. We have a very strong young women movement in the country. And I believe that if we continue pushing, we will achieve these dreams.
Thank you, Fatou. It's very inspiring. We're going to turn to Hanan now on this question of the factors that are driving success in the work, factors that are enabling you to see transformative change in the state of Palestine. Over to you, Hanan.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I just would like to say that despite the success of the program faced critical challenges, particularly as pertaining to the work on responsive legislations and on the gender justice component in general. But as one of the very good examples, our work on the family protection bill. I don't know if you have heard about the harsh attack that the civil society organizations and international human rights also organizations and the UN has faced due to their work and advocacy for the endorsement of a responsive family protection bill. To answer your question, I would say that one of the factors that contributed to the success of the program has to do with the composition of the program, which brings together very specialized experience and expertise of 3 mandated and specialized agencies at both global and local levels. This has actually supported the program to perfectly position itself as a lead UN rule of law program in Palestine. Also, stakeholders' trust in the program within the justice and security sectors played a key role and supported the program to succeed. This is due mainly to the highly capacitated human resources in the program. Also, the participatory approach that the program follows all through the process to ensure ownership of partners. The program also uses a combination of the bottom-up and top-down approaches, strengthening grassroots access to justice and reforming formal justice system. Other factors that the program has been using and I believe have supported the success have to do with the combination of multitude of approaches and frameworks that take into account and balance the interests and rights of different groups while maintaining core human rights and gender justice principles. These include the victim-centered approach, the fair trial principles, the gender transformative approach, which focuses on targeting different groups of the community, including men, boys, community leaders, women, and others to advocate for women's rights. Also, we cannot speak about the program's success without thinking of the wide network and strong partnership grounds that the program managed to build with stakeholders, including civil society organizations, governmental partners, syndicates, coalition, and the international community. So this has also supported the program to facilitate coordination, particularly in critical discussion among different groups, ensuring and fostering complementarity at the same time. Also, I would like to highlight that we believe that the commitment of some of the key partners is paramount. Example, I would like to give that when I spoke about the specialized services, I just would like to say that we don't have anything in the law that speaks about the establishment of specialized services, but because the program managed to ensure the participatory approach and ensure effective participation from the part of our partners within the justice and security sectors, they believed in the idea and supported it. And they took decisions at their levels to establish the specialized services. So this is one of the very good examples that, you know, we keep reminding ourselves about, particularly when we wanna like analyze the lessons learned and the factors that have supported the program to succeed. I also would like to say that when it comes to lessons learned, one of the things that is very critical has to do with the fact that if you want to really have a real impact on the lives of women victims and survivors of violence and to enhance their access to justice, you have to carefully understand their circumstances, carefully listening to their experiences, encourage and also emphasize in their work with the service providers on the importance of listening to the survivors' voices and concerns and opinions. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, in relation to the ownership, it's very critical to ensure it from the very beginning. So it shouldn't, this particular aspect shouldn't come at a later stage during the implementation or you know, maybe during the evaluation. It has to be there from the very beginning. So this is in a nutshell from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Hanan. I'm quite familiar with the UNDP UN Women Program Sawatia in the state of Palestine. I want to really emphasize how important that partnership is for UNDP, and that's one of the reasons why Simone and I are doing this today. Is that how the impact of what we do as the United Nations is improved so much when we have this overall framework. I know you even have other partners within the Sawatia program. And I think that's great. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about which partners are there. I also just want to thank you for highlighting the role of human rights defenders, as we're also hearing strongly from the rest of the panelists. We'll hear from Aisha now, and human rights defenders are increasingly struggling globally. Under threat to life and limb in their engagement. So the voices of survivors, the voices of human rights defenders, and participation in these efforts is particularly important. So thanks for bringing home that part. Just remind us, who is it under the Sawatia umbrella?
Yeah, thank you. At the level of the UN agencies, we have, in addition to UN Women and UNDP, also UNICEF. Adding to that we have, you know, coordination platforms with other UN agencies, with other international organizations and member states, including, for instance, which we coordinate on constant basis with them on issues related to the policing services or issues related to legal aid. To that, we have a wide network and partnership with civil society organizations in the West Bank and in Gaza and East Jerusalem, including, as I mentioned, coalitions and syndicates I think I answered your question, right?
Yeah. Thanks very much. It's great. It's just a great coalition. Thanks very much, Hanan. Aisha, we're turning to you, Aisha, for some reflections on the factors which are making things work or happen. What are the ingredients for success in the work that you're engaged in for transgender rights in Pakistan?
Well, as I mentioned earlier as well, that the best thing is that the government and the UN agencies are following is the inclusive approach. So now we see that whenever there is any drafting process, any policy making happening, any consultation happening regarding transgender people, we see transgender activists, we see grassroots level community members and leaders participating in all these important meetings and consultations. So, with this inclusive approach, the laws are being progressive because they take the feedback from the relevant stakeholder. So I think community-led approaches are being followed now in Pakistan. We see many transgender-led organizations now working in the country. So that has also strengthened the trans movement in Pakistan. And especially I would like to mention here that while we were working on the drafting of the transgender law, so the entire transgender community of the country got together um, on one platform. I think that was a very good thing. So I think unity is the key. Inclusive approach is the key, and with this, I'm very hopeful that with this, with this inclusive approach, UNDP and the government will, have more progressive policies. And as I also mentioned earlier, that I really look, forward that this process will continue, and there would be more economic opportunities for the transgender community. And I would also like to highlight over here, because since you have asked me about the factors which are important for success, the transgender community in Pakistan has always been very visible because we have a rich history. We have Khwaja Sara culture, and it was always there even before the inception of Pakistan. Transgender community is present in every part of the world, but the most organized structure is the Khwaja culture, which is present in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So I think this has also been a very important factor in having a progressive law in Pakistan, because the community, because the general public and the parliamentarians and the religious scholars, like they were familiar with what Hijra community is, because everybody has seen transgender people around them. So I think that has been a very a strong element. So I'm really glad that in terms of visibility, Pakistan is an example, a leader for the Muslim countries, because in many Muslim countries of the world, transgender people are not visible. I mean, you can't even express your gender identity. So I think, yeah, so that has been a great factor. And now Pakistan is I think the only Muslim country in the world which gives the right of self-identification to the transgender community. Yeah.
Thanks, Aisha. This is really important reflections, and this interplay between the cultural acceptability and legal acceptability is particularly important. And how do we, if we're working in other countries where the rights are less easily accepted, as you're saying, because of this the specificity of Pakistan, you've been able to drive this change. We obviously have to find ways of also changing the cultural environment within which we're operating to change the legal environment. And this is particularly hard, and it would be really fabulous if we could borrow from all of your learning and bring that also to other countries in which we work. So, but thanks so much for those reflections. I'm aware that we have a set of questions that are coming in online, and I've got my co-moderator Simone is busy and the team are busy working on those. Simona, we have questions there for our panelists. Can I just hand to you to pick up with them directly? And thanks so much for those insights, everyone.
Yes, I mean, in terms of this dialogue, of course, it's key and critical that we have these reflections and sharing from different countries. But what makes it even more vibrant is your interaction with the panelists. And we have quite a number of questions. So thank you for engaging with us. I'm going to put forward two questions. The first one will be to Fatou, and then the second will be to Hanan. Now, in terms of the first question, it is for Fatou. The Gambia has a female VP, Dr. Touray, who publicly opposes FGM, female genital mutilation, and gender-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence. From your point of view, from your perspective, Fatou, how important are female members of government to sustain gender justice issues? Over to you, Fatou.
Thank you. Firstly, earlier in my introduction, I did highlighted that in the Gambia, we are very good at appointing deputies, women, and giving women the deputy position. So it's tradition that the VP is a woman, just like the different institutions, most of the time, the women are deputies. Sadly, when it comes to making decisions, these women don't have as much impact as we would like. So, for instance, in the having a VP, for me, it's very important to have women in leadership, regardless of the impact that they're having in that position. But it's for other young women to see a role model. So when I was growing up, from the community I grew up, from my family, I am the first female to go to school, to go to university. My parents didn't go. But from a very young age, I saw a female VP, and that inspired me. As a young woman, as a girl, seeing a woman in that position made me believe that I could reach that position, or I could be beyond that position. So for that, in that sense, it is important for us to see women in leadership position, because in our culture and in our society, we are always told that it is men who lead and women follow, and those narratives need to change. So of course, it's very important that we do have these women lead in leadership positions, but also women need to, not just for a ticking box, not just to have a woman to say that we are being inclusive just because we have a woman. When we have women in these positions, we want meaningful representation where they have a voice, where they can make direct impact to the lives of women and girls in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatou. And indeed, you're absolutely right about the importance of having women in leadership positions. Sadly, I think I recall a statistic from the UN Secretary General that we have to wait until 2063 until we have gender parity at national parliament level, as well as local governance. So we need to get our skates on. So now please let me turn to Hanan with your question. And your question is, women victims of violence, or rather women survivors of violence, are really in need to be provided with comprehensive legal aid services. Does Palestine provide this?
Yes, actually, it's a very good question for different reasons. One of those reasons has to do with the fact that there's no unified legal framework in Palestine. That's why we see many women suffering from challenges related to this situation. So, for instance, if a woman from the West Bank marries a man from East Jerusalem who has a Jerusalemite ID, until she has a permit to live there, she will be there without any, if I may say, legal document that justifies her presence. And this, in many cases, unfortunately, might be used by the husband, particularly in cases of disputes. To respond to your question, actually, until now, unfortunately, the state is not yet there. Although through Sawasiya program, a legal aid strategy has been developed through full participation and, if I may say, effective participation by all stakeholders. But when it comes to the legal aid services themselves, they are in most cases until now provided through civil society organizations that are also relying on the availability of funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. Sorry, I'm having some challenges with my video. I'm now going to hand back to Katie, who will put forward 2 questions to 2 panelists. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you. You're taking me by surprise, so I'm not quite ready for that. But I'm very happy to ad lib. So I think we have we have questions for the panelists, which are in the Q&A. If anybody else wants to add, please go ahead. I mean, we have specific questions around legal services, the provision of legal aid services, and the root causes of GBV and gender inequality in society. I'm particularly interested from the perspective of a rule of law practitioner on the idea of providing legal services, especially in contexts where we have had a high degree of conflict or human rights abuse, and how that achieves transformational change. So it'd be very interesting to hear from colleagues on that. And the second question, which is around legal pluralism and working in different legal environments and how we get these incompatible environments to work together. I think that's particularly important for the Palestinian reflections. Can I throw these over to Fatou? Can I start with you? The legal aid environment, how important has that been in the Gambia?
Okay, thank you again. I think for us at the moment, especially in the TJ process, we haven't reached that level yet. However, access to legal aid has always been an issue in the Gambia. First, when it comes to gender-based violence, when violations occur, it is very uncommon for women to access the legal aid or access justice. So that in itself is a big barrier that we are facing, which is why it is important through this process that women are empowered to know their rights, to know that they can have access to justice. So that is a big challenge that we face as a country. My background is not law, so I'm not very aware of that aspect, but I do know that from community perspectives, many women, even if they want to access legal aid or legal support or justice, there are so many cultural barriers that stop them from going. But in addition to those barriers, there are also institutional problems. So for instance, we see instances where a woman who has been sexually assaulted or sexually abused go to a police station to report, and it is not in a very gender sensitive environment. So you go and it's just some male police officers interviewing you, or who are not gender sensitive, who don't understand sexual violence, where they are judged from the start, and that puts up a lot of women from accessing justice. On top of that, within the duration that it takes when women go to court, it takes a long time, and a lot of people will withdraw their cases before it gets to a certain level. So in the Gambia, we do have a lot of challenge around that, and it's an area that we need to really work on to give women the awareness to know their rights, and especially that the access to justice is a human right for them.
Yeah, thanks, Fatou. This point about how the quality of services is as important as the quantity of services at the end of the day. That's a really important piece, because one poor quality advice can put a woman or a young girl off for their whole lives to ever going back to get further advice. Thank you. I want to turn over to Hanan around the question around legal pluralism, or the question around legal aid, whichever one works for you.
Actually, I think I've already answered the one on legal aid.
Would you like to talk? There was a specific question around legal pluralism and the different legal environments. I know that's a big issue for you in Palestine. Would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. Can you please read again the question on legal pluralism?
So if you open the Q&A, it's a question that was asked very early, which is around justice, how justice is delivered, and whether, and in situations where legal pluralism is the norm, right? So you have many different systems of law. How can you harness that? How can you actually make it benefit the work rather than hinder the work? So it's a question about how do we make these difficulties work for us rather than just having to address the different, can we find some opportunities in that? And have you managed to find some opportunities in the work that you do?
Yeah, actually, to be honest, the fact or the existence of different legal frameworks, in many instances, they create challenges on ground, particularly when you have, you know, as I mentioned, the example I mentioned on like having a woman marrying a Palestinian man who holds another ID, because in Palestine, the legal pluralism can be analyzed apart from the political situation. So it's not only about the legal pluralism, you have different political situation, which on ground complicate things. But at the same time, if we wanna like try to at the end of the day to address the challenges and try to mitigate associated risks, I think also from the experience of Westia, what we are doing is that we are strengthening and encouraging a coordination between civil society organizations that are providing particularly legal aid services to those who are living in the Negev, which is under Israeli jurisdiction. We're supporting them to like coordinate the services, and we are supporting having them networking, for instance, with the family courts in the West Bank. Just to give an example on this, polygamy is prohibited under the Israeli law. What happens in the case of Palestinian women who get married to men in the Negev is that because they cannot conclude the marriage there, they come, for instance, to the West Bank and Gaza, and they have their marriages concluded. But what happens with women when they go there, they don't have any legal document, and even their children cannot be like registered under their names, and they face a lot of challenges. So through Sawasia, we've been like supporting the coordination between civil society organizations that are providing legal aid and psychosocial support there in the Negev with the family court here in the West Bank. So we are encouraging them to put like a kind of criteria, kind of limitations in order to ensure that those women at a minimum will have their rights maintained. I would also like to say that one of the things that we are doing within this context, we are supporting the establishment of accountability measures and data collection, responsive data collection, to support the analysis, to support the production of knowledge products and others to be used for advocacy purposes and also for awareness purposes. So I think this is enough in a nutshell from my side to answer this question.
Thank you, Hanan. Simona, I think, has a question for Aisha, and then we will be moving to wrap up the session.
Yes, I do. So Aisha, the question is, do you get the support of media regarding the challenges of transgender issues?
Sorry. So media is a very important stakeholder, and It has, I think we are working on it. Last year we had a consultation with the media persons to have such programs where transgender person is shown in an empowered position. But I think unfortunately media still has to improve, because even today we see that many TV channels in Pakistan, they still show a transgender person as a laughing stock. There are these, talk show. There are these shows. I don't know what we call them in media terminology, but there are these shows which are aired every night on different channels, and most of these shows are comedy shows, and they always show a transgender person in a very derogatory manner. I mean, a transgender person is just shown as someone who is a laughing stock, and everybody's making fun of her. So I think this has to stop, because when I am sitting with my family, with my siblings, and I'm watching TV, and when such kind of shows come up, I feel embarrassed sitting in front of my family members, and my family members feel embarrassed being associated with me, because when they see a transgender person in such manner, that is very derogatory. So I think media has to be sensitized. There has to be programs, dramas, seasons, and movies which show transgender person in a powerful position. So I think we still have to work in that direction. And I really want to see a movie or a drama where a transgender person is shown as as a teacher, or as a doctor, or as an engineer, or as someone intellectual. So I think, yeah. So we still have to have to sensitize media on that.
Aisha, thank you. And also just for sharing that personal experience, because indeed it must be painful, and much has to change very quickly. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time, and so we cannot take any more questions. However, they will be written up in the question and answer box, and I believe we will try in some of the format to respond through our panelists to those questions. So before I hand over to Katie, I just want to wrap up from my end and also just reflect on some of the key points that have come out from the discussions and the videos and the questions and answers. And I think there are three key words: inclusivity, partnerships, and intersectionality. And these are three areas of work that collectively we are trying to support, whether it's through partnerships with government, civil society, UN sisters, etc. But what is clear is that in order to have any impact whatsoever, partnerships and collaboration are key and critical. And so having said that, I would now like to hand over to Katie to give the final closing. And thank you everyone for sharing this day with me.
Thanks, Simona. Maybe I could ask all the panelists also to put their cameras on, and then we can see everybody as we finish up. I want to absolutely echo Simona's concluding words around partnership, inclusion, and intersectionality. These ways of working and principles upon which we work, I want to combine those with a focus on justice, a focus on rights, and a focus on accountability above all. I think in this time of living in this complex era where we're impacted so severely by the global pandemic and by all of the ongoing challenges of human rights abuses and discrimination that have been described today, we have a particular need to focus on ensuring accountability by governments and for bringing justice for women everywhere. And I think the panelists today have really highlighted the amazing efforts that they're engaged in. And what's important about that is obviously for every woman who is here, there are thousands of us, thousands more women and girls behind us who are pushing for those efforts and who need support, who need solidarity and they need to be able to be highlighted as we talk about this important work. In UNDP's experience, when we're working globally on women's access to justice, on gender justice, on security for women, which is particularly important. And all of this is with an aim to promote support to human rights defenders and to support the principle of rule of law as a whole. For us, it's particularly important to be working with UN Women, who are our champions within the UN system. And I want to really thank Simona for this great joint effort today. I think that I'm hitting the end of the time here. I see that there's been great participation in this panel and also great participation online in the social media. And I want to really encourage everybody who's here to continue this conversation. In fact, International Women's Day covers 2 days because we have the fabulous time zone effect of waking up in Asia and going to sleep on this side of the world where I sit in Brooklyn and New York. So please, let's continue this conversation. Let it not stop at the end of International Women's Day, and let us make sure that we invest in these efforts, support women globally, and celebrate gender justice for all of us. Thanks, all of us. If you want to put on your videos, everybody, we can see you, we can celebrate us also. And thanks, I think we hit around 80 or 90 participants at the peak of the webinar, and that was absolutely fabulous. Thanks to the organizers. There's a lot of people behind the scenes who put all of this together. And most of all, thank you to Hanan, to Fatou, and to Aisha for great presentations and for the videos also showcasing the work. It's been great to see you, and it's great to connect all over the planet right now. Thanks, Simona. You're on my screen, Simona, so it's lovely to see you. Anything else from your side?
And no, I think you've captured everything, and just once more to appreciate the panelists for that excellent interaction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, everybody, and
Thank
we'll
you.
close the webinar here. Bye. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.